not a chaotic, not a chaotic life in which we live a life of integrity, but also integrity, as we'll talk about in a bit, in its essential sense, integrity, integral, integration, where we have, we live a life that's integrated with our whole nature, our true nature, where we're not divided in the sense of thinking that we're separate from or estranged from the world or others or being as such. And I would like to say that Sila um, has this dimension to it. Now, again, these three pillars of the Dharma, we separate them out so we can talk about them, but they all belong together and they all work together. If our practice is clicking, all of these things are in play. And they're actually aspects of a singularity of instantaneous presence, awakened presence. So it occurred to me as I was thinking about Sila, um, it's really about being in a good place. You know how it is. Like sometimes, right? You're in a good place. Other times we say, "Oh, I'm not in a good place," which means I could be irritable. You know, you better watch out. I'm not in a good place. We might say it to somebody, or we might just know that, and so we back off. If there's tensions, for example, in relationships, we remove ourselves because we're aware enough to know I am not in a good place. But when we're in a good place, then we are in the bosom of our moral integrity. And so we participate in the world that has all kinds of virtues or paramitas that just come to us, they occur to us to be patient, to be generous, to be loving, to be compassionate, to have some equanimity, and so forth, because we're in a good place. So that's what Sila wants to focus on, getting in a good place. And so there's a continuum of this, a deepening of this. And so the foundation, the first part is we first of all don't want to be in a bad place. We don't want to engage in behaviors that are going to agitate our mind and harm either ourself or others. So the basis of Sila is non-harming. And so we check and we see what is our capacity? How vulnerable are we? To what extent do we need to restrain ourselves from acting in ways that cause ourselves and others problems? For instance, we might have a drinking problem. And we know if I have one drink at dinner, I'm not going to be able to stop there. One drink is going to turn into a whole bottle. When I get on social media, I only intend to be there for a few minutes, and 2 hours go by, and I go into doom scrolling. So I know this about myself. There could be any number of fixations or addictions that we have. And so we realize I need help. to deal with this. I've tried by exerting my just whatever willpower, and I need handrails. I need help. And so it makes a lot of sense to make vows, adopt precepts, adopt a code to live by very deliberately, very intentionally. And so in the Buddha Dharma, it's very common on retreats and other places, or certainly for monks and nuns, to refrain from certain behaviors, behaviors of body, actions of body, and also of voice. So we don't want to kill or steal or assault anybody. We're going to keep track of our sexuality. So we're not going to either exploit somebody or give ourselves away if we're prone to like a sex and love kind of addiction issue. And so we're just not going to do it. No killing, no stealing, no sex, no intoxicants, etc. We make these vows. Why? Because we can't trust ourselves. And we're honest enough with ourselves to face that truth. We don't fool ourselves. This is the path. Non-harming. This helps provide conducive circumstance for us to develop our samadhi, our calm abiding. So we don't have a bad conscience, we don't have bad judgments about ourselves. We know we can't control ourselves. So this basic level is one of self-control, of self-discipline. We are now adopting a self-improvement project very deliberately. I want to be a better person. I want to look at that person in the mirror and feel good about him. I want us to be in a good place. So this is a foundation. As we stop being a nuisance to ourselves and others, the system will quiet, and then we can become more subtle with how we're showing up in the world. So in this first part, it's really all about me. It has to be. World peace begins at home. We start with ourselves. But then we begin to notice, as we get more settled in ourselves, as we open ourselves, we become more tuned in to the people around us. So there's an intermediate level of moral integrity where we start to care about other people as much as we care about ourselves. And so if the foundational aspect is one of taming the mind, we can now begin to train the mind. So at the beginning, we want to not do negative things. We don't want to create negative karma, but we can also begin to cultivate positive karma and plant positive karmic seeds into our mind stream. Not only plant them, but water them and feed them and fertilize them and let them grow bigger. So there's a shift that happens here. In addition to not harming, now we can also nourish and help and be positive. So this is more, we could say, a path of something like a bodhisattva. We really want to dedicate our life not only to cleaning up our own act, but also being of better service to others. This is the kind of thing where, we might reflect like, what do we want on our tombstone, right? Like how do we want to be remembered? How can we be our best self? Not just um, not be a problem. So at this level, we're also shifting our focus from our behavior to the intentions that drive our behavior. So this is in, um, this is certainly in Theravada, but it's very prominent in the Mahayana. We're focusing on intentions are more important than actions. So for instance, on a basic level, we say, oh, killing is bad. Don't kill, just don't do it. Don't drink, something like that. Don't kill. But on the Mahayana level, you might kill in order to save innocent people. For instance, this is in the in the sutras. In order to save many lives, you may take a life of somebody who has murderous intent, and you would do that to save innocent people, but you also do it to spare that person the consequence of their karmic action, which is very severe, murder, pretty bad, not going to go well for them. So the driving force is one of compassion. So you can see that this is a little more, what can we say, edgy or dangerous, because a judgment has to be exerted, and we might be wrong. If we're just following a rule and a vow, we just take ourselves out of the equation and we just do it. But when we have more capacity, now we have more also responsibility. And so it depends on what our intention is. If our intention is angry or hateful, not good. If our intention is kind, compassionate, good. That has precedence at this level. And so we're talking now more, not about controlling our actions, but about controlling or befriending, becoming more in tune with our thoughts, intentions. Thoughts are not necessarily intentions. You can have a thought that floats through, and it doesn't necessarily have to form into an intention. The mind will throw up all kinds of stuff. But when we dwell on it, now we're forming that thought into an intention. And so we want to work on the psychic level more than the physical level. We do both. It's in addition. We still want to be, it's still a self-improvement agenda. We're on a path where we want to get lighter and more open, and especially now, we want to energize and feed our compassionate proclivities whenever we can. This becomes now an addition in terms of our purpose of living and practicing. And also here, there is the shift from it being about me to it being about others. So it's more selfless. And what happens as we move, our practice deepens, then we also begin to pay closer attention to these basic givens of suffering, the cause, impermanence, and no self or non-self. So this is not necessarily Sila, but it goes along with the deepening of practice. We can also now talk about Sila in terms of bodhicitta, the awakened heart, the awakened mind. In particular, at this level, we're talking about relative bodhicitta. I've kind of introduced this in the past, and later on, we're going to go more into this. I think it's like late summer or something, or maybe early fall. We're going to focus a lot. I'm going to focus. You're invited. um, on relative bodhicitta. But I'll mention now it has these two aspects. It has aspiration and it has action. The aspiration is when we say, may all beings um, be happy and have loving kindness and compassion and so forth. We have that aspiration. May all beings be free. But then also, we do something about it. We don't just have a good thought. Relative bodhicitta has the intention, but then it wants to follow through in some manner. So this, we could say, our moral integrity begins to flesh out in vivo. Yeah. And on the Zoom, we had a synchronous event happened here. Something fell when I said in vivo. We're also at this level, um, we're still we still have we're still doing vows. However, we're upgrading those to the Bodhisattva vow. And this upgrade is so similar, I think, to the upgrade that Jesus brought to Judaism. Judaism, if you know about it, there's a lot of rules about the Sabbath and about what you eat first and kosher and how you have sex. And I mean, there's like all kinds of rules. And so what the Nazarene said after his awakening was, I take away all those rules. If you're going to follow me, I take away all those rules, throw all of them away. And instead, there's two. No other gods before God. No golden calves. No material objects. No kings or queens. Nothing. God comes first. I'm not going to go into what that means right now because it's a little tricky in Christianity. And then the second one, love your neighbor as yourself. So this is Bodhisattva class. So the Bodhisattva vow is, I vow to help all beings attain enlightenment before me. Everybody goes first. I'll bring up the rear. You stop suffering. I'll wait. I'll take the pain. It's an upgrade. It's steeper. So as we begin to consider that idea and work, for example, with the Tonglen practice and and the whole attitude of not trying to get rid, to block our defilements and our obscurations. At this level, we don't block them anymore. We befriend them. So the idea is not, I can't get angry. No, I'm going to let myself feel my anger fully. In fact, I'm going to breathe it in more deeply and then transform it, release it. So this is where training becomes different than taming. It's a path really of we're transforming now our stuff, lightening it, working with it. It's more demanding. It's a steeper path. So we see what we're capable of. And as we're able to put this into play, then our practice deepens still more, and we wind up at what I'm thinking of as a more the advanced level of Sila, of moral integrity, which understanding as absolute bodhicitta. We're not at this point, we get so still and open and clear that the emphasis is no longer in training the mind or taming the mind, but in attuning the mind to its own nature. Tuning in to the whole of what's going on. Opening ourselves to the point where the split between self and other dissolves, and we begin to have a taste of undivided presence, bodhi, awareness, simple, unimpeded awareness, absolute bodhicitta, the nature of the mind. We say absolute or ultimate. We could also just simply say essential or basic. Because we've gone through the purification in which we've let others matter to us as much as we matter to ourselves. We've gone through that. We've opened to that. Maybe we can't live there yet, but we know what it is. And so we know it's not enough for me to be free. If you're still suffering, I feel for you. And so this division between self and other, self and world becomes more and more permeable, such that the boundary breaks, the boundary dissolves, dualistic vision collapses, if only for a moment. And so at this point, this more advanced point, we can say now we're on the noble path of awakening, the one with which I've been referencing from time to time, the Arya Magga. We kind of use different words to talk about it. Glimpse of oneness, for instance, non-duality. At this point, moral integrity comes to it is in full flower, or we could say its essential nature. And then there is what's talked about as unbreakable Sila. We have unbreakable Sila. We can't harm anybody. We're totally harmless. In this space of instantaneous presence, it's impossible to harm another being or ourselves. It cannot be done. It's unbreakable. Our integrity is pure integrity, total, in at least for the moment of integration, in a moment. of presence. We are integrated. We are whole and undivided. So there's nothing that we're at all interested in taking advantage of. And so in the terms of integrity, we could say that we are at one with the way things are. So integral in its essential sense. And our Sila becomes unbreakable because there's nothing to break. There's no position that we've taken that's apart from the whole. There's no fixation that we're holding on to. Also, there's no better place we want to get to. There's nothing to break because we're in a moment, and we say moment because that's like the best we can use, but it's not like a second or a microsecond. Now we're talking about instantaneous in the sense of timeless. We're outside of time in this essential sense of Sila. We're not in a karmic world anymore. We're not in this is not a moment where we're in samsara. So that's also where I'll continue to talk about this notion we have ordinarily where we're in samsara now, we're going to get to nirvana then. And that's the basic way of looking at things. This is the way the Buddha taught it. He was teaching to a particular people. But the Dharma has matured, as I've mentioned before, and I'll probably mention again, over 25 centuries where people practicing the Dharma have not been idle. They have been applying themselves. And so the Dharma has developed. And so that's where we can say that there's not just one way. There's not just one Dharma door, not just one path. There's many paths that are relevant to different people having different capacities in different situations. So that's where when I'm talking now about kind of basic, intermediate, and advanced, just as a piece of shorthand, this kind of gives the spectrum of possibility. And so I should say that it doesn't mean we're always in one of those. Depending on if we're in a good place or not such a good place, we could be in any of them. But I'm presenting this advanced stuff, both because it's where my heart is and where I'm at and what I'm doing to my best of my ability, but also that you never know where your state of mind will be. So if you're really troubled, well, it's important to stay basic and humble and diligent. But as your heart opens, as your mind opens, you don't need to stay there. At this point, vows are beside the point. There's no need to have vows. You don't need a vow when your heart is unconditionally open and you're totally harmless. Vows are unnecessary. So you see, do I need a vow? And then you see, would it be good for me to actually be more compassionate? Should I take like a vow like a bodhisattva vow? Challenge myself a bit more, stretch myself. Because I kind of know I'm a little tight. I could be a little more generous. I can be impatient. Maybe I should, what happens if I practice patience more? The paramitas and so forth. And then it can happen, or we find ourselves totally open. a glimpse. Everything's here. Then it's good to know to have something to do because the mind will crank up again. And so if we know that there's a practice, an advanced practice at that moment where we happen to be in a really good space. So rather than just kind of thinking, oh, aren't I cool to be in a good space or something, and then we're lost it, to know what to do, which we'll talk a little bit about it this day long coming up, and then more in the fall. But the thing to do is to relax. There's nothing to do. This is very important, particularly for very diligent yogis and yoginis, which is one reason I, by the way, happen to really like Mountain Stream, because to a large extent, you guys are really legit. You're serious. And I love that because I've had to be. And I know people with high capacity that aren't serious. And they may or may not be progressing, which is to say, they may or may not be integrating their pure awareness. So being honest with ourselves, and we see, do I need to exercise self-restraint? Should I? Maybe better to exercise more selfless activity, more relation, maybe be more relational. And then when things collapse, the bottom falls out, heart's open, mind's open, to then get used to it. So going forward, I'll talk more about this thing, which I'm going to say now. But I want to say it now anyway, because I love saying it. Once it really got clear for me that there's no way you can get enlightened. There's no way you can do it. No meditation will get you there. There's no meditation you can do that will get you enlightened. And so there's this quip in Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan form of Buddhism, that says people who do not meditate do not get enlightened because they do not meditate. People who meditate do not get enlightened because they meditate. It's nothing that can be done. Realization of Buddha nature is cognizance of non-doing, non-striving, non-reaction, non-action. It's the only way. There isn't another way. Working on ourselves, getting in a better place, strengthening our non-distraction, so the mind just doesn't, carry us hither and there 24/7, just waste our lives. So very important to collect ourselves, calm our system, abide in calm. And then within the calm to see through, to see the truth of suffering, how it happens, to see the truth of impermanence, the lack of solidity of anything. Nothing is stable, including the self, seen through this self illusion. So we, we think we hear it, we reflect on it, we look again. I feel like I exist. I really do. Think I things and the Dharma says I don't, and intellectually I agree, but let me look into that again and again, looking into it. Is it true? This is where the Dharma is so strong. Don't take it on faith. Don't take it on mere belief. Find out. Is it true? Look into it deeply. And then when you discover, when you see, there's nothing to see because it's changing into something else, relax. So in the beginning, we can't trust ourselves. Sometimes we can't trust ourselves. So when we can't, we do level A. We make a purpose for our life. Vows, a purpose to live by, a code to live by. Then we become more trustworthy as a friend, as a spouse, as a parent, as a child, as sister or brother, etc. We become more trustworthy to others. Up to the point where we can trust in the open emptiness of being. We trust ourselves, not our reactive mind, but we trust the nature of that reactive mind, the open emptiness. This is unbreakable Sila. Well, that just about covered. Let's take a break, a little stretch, and then we'll come back and talk. Um, Robin, what do you think? Let's seven. Let's do 7:10. How about that? Okay. So we're back and we're open for business. So yes, open for questions. We'll start here inside and I guess do it on the Zoom,
Yeah.
oscillate.
So how close do I have to hold it? About like that? Oh, all right. Yeah. So you touched a little on this that we use different words to kind of point at what's difficult to be exacting. And so I'm curious, I hear words like Buddha nature and emptiness and great natural perfection. And are these the same type of experience of pure awareness? Or are there different transcendent states that they use different terms to describe?
It depends.
Specific. And you get
It yeah, it depends. Um, right. So sometimes yes and sometimes no. Kind of where the the speaker is coming from and or the context, it could make a difference. Like for instance, emptiness, very important. Emptiness, open or openness, um, absolute bodhicitta. So those are the same thing. And this is really the apex, the destination of Mahayana Buddhism. You want to get access, recognize that there's nothing solid, neither out there nor in here. So, very profound understanding of impermanence and non self, both objects and subject. In Theravada, it's more the focus is on mainly non self. And so non-self, there's no self, but what there are constituents. There are aggregates, and the aggregates are made of either moments, indivisible time moments, or like form aggregate, it has atoms, some kind of atoms. So there's stuff. When we get to the Mahayana, we look more deeply into that, and then we see that you can't find atoms either. And so this is where also um, quantum physics now confirms that there's no atoms are made of subatomic particles. Subatomic particles are made of whatever quarks or who knows what. Oh, it just keeps the more you look, the more wacky it gets, the less solid it gets. So emptiness recognizes that there is a self, but neither are there constituents of a self or anything else. And so the ground, so you have a little ground to begin with, and then you lose that ground. And now we say emptiness, openness. That is the end of the sutra teachings. It's the beginning of Dzogchen. And so there's a recognition of emptiness, and there's a recognition that emptiness has functions. There's lucidity, cognizance. And when these are together, knowingness, openness, then there's unconfined compassion, unlimited responsivity, compassion, not only as we've been talking about it relationally, but also in terms of all kinds of responsivity comes out. So it's the same, but not. Buddha nature, Buddha nature isn't talked about in basic Buddhism. That's not the goal. The goal is to be free of suffering. And if you're diligent and you walk the path, then you can become an arhat and be free and be liberated and be free of suffering. On the Mahayana level, now we can talk about Buddha nature, the third turning of the wheel. Right? So the first turning are the Four Noble Truths, second turning is emptiness, third turning is Buddha nature. There's other ways of looking at that triad, but that's one of them. And so Buddha nature in the Mahayana sense is pretty much Tathagata Garbha, Sujata Garbha, Buddha nature is pretty much the same as Shunyata, emptiness, openness. But in Dzogchen, it's a little different. First of all, it's not talked about exactly that way. Instead of Buddha nature, more talked about as nature of the mind. Because still with a Buddha, we think, oh, that's really special. Somebody enlightened out there, rather than with a capital B. When we get to these more advanced things, then it's really Buddha, fine, but with a small b. It's our essential nature. So it's a little different, but it's the same neighborhood.
Thank you.
We'll take someone from the Zoom audience.
Just go ahead and raise your hand if you would have a question on Zoom. Doesn't,
Or a comment.
or a comment.
Or a song.
Anybody? Okay, we'll turn it back over to you, Robin.
All right. Does anyone have a question in the in-person audience? All right, Meryl.
I'm Merle. This thing that you talked about that I had not heard. Everything, I hear so many new things, but it's really great because if I hear them like, multiple times and I'm like, okay, I'll look into that. I'm reading I Am That. And I found out that he went on a solo path. He had 4 children and a wife. And so then I stopped there. That was just last week. Because I have a daughter and I keep trying to find a place to live and everybody's like, not with the daughter. And when you talked about karma, it was so interesting. I hadn't heard this before, but then I feel, and I could be wrong. I'm not conscious enough about it, but I feel like what you said is the reason why I'm continuing to struggle is because I'm in a karmic, as far as I can see, I am. This is my 3rd daughter. And there's a lot of similarities of trauma. And then once we relax or once we open or once there's enough spaciousness or the capacity changes, we can become aware and step out of it finally. I don't know if that was a comment or a question, but I wanted you to kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, yeah, our where we live according to karmic law. We live, for the most part, in a dimension of dependent origination, interdependence. Things are there's causes and effects, which is essentially the meaning of karma. And so we can find ourselves in a bad situation, where, as I was saying earlier, we could be in a bad place, or we could be in a good place, or find ourselves in a good situation, or neutral. And so sometimes those can feel random. Other times we know there's we can see we created it. We know, I did that, this resulted. But we can't always track those things. But according to Buddhist psychology, everything is karmically interconnected, is karmically grounded, follows the law of cause and effect. And so when times are rough, the bad news is that things are difficult, rough, or horrible, or traumatic. The good news is that as long as we live through it, metabolize it, we release it, because that's a consequence. And so meeting like a bad situation and not making it worse by, for instance, so many ways that can be done, right? Like when you think, oh, I don't have a car. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a loser. No, so now we're having thought. We're exercising the action of thought, voice, body, these 3 dimensions. So now we're making matters worse. And then if we really believe our self-criticism, it's not good. We're just creating more karma, not good karma. But if we take our situation, difficult as it is, and we work with it with awareness, the best we can. We don't deny it, and we don't inadvertently perpetuate it by following old bad habits that maybe got us into that predicament. Right? We look for the exits. We look for alternatives. And whenever there's one, we go that way. That seems right, that feels good, feels better. Sometimes the decisions, we have to make tough decisions. Both feel equally bad. Well, we make our best one. And then something happens, and then we make our next best one. Keep over and over again, making our next best decision. And so then we look and see, how are our decisions informed? What's our intentions? So if we kind of have our behavior together so that we're not doing harm to people, not hurting people or ourselves, and we're not also verbally ragging on people, dissing people, criticizing somebody, using harsh language and all of that. If we're not also not doing that, that means we're able to restrain ourselves from being out of control. So if that's true, then the place to work is on the intentions. So that we're not governed, dominated by our emotional reactions and mental fixations, but we can be able to exercise more awareness in dealing with the mess, for instance, that we might find ourselves in.
Thank you. Does anyone on the Zoom audience have a question? No. If you think of one, we might have time to come back to you. Anyone? Oh, yay. Who is that? Go
Me.
ahead.
Steve.
Unmute yourself and ask. Please state your name.
Steve, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
How'd you know I was muted?
I could see it. You're on my screen and there's a
Okay.
little
Okay.
tab.
You're psychic. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking of my own practice and what you were saying about karma. And I've thought a lot about karma and the practice. And I have a pretty strong sort of a bodhisattva vow kind of a thing that I'm doing a couple of times a day. And as an artist working with my images, with my photographs, what I have found is that when I have created an image that I really love, what it's about is what I'm sensing in it is an element of life, almost like an intelligence of its own. And it's very powerful and very moving for me. And the sense that I have just from doing this practice for a good while now is that, life has gotten much better. And, I took on the bodhisattva kind of approach as an experiment. And I can say that it's been a good experiment. And I'm happy with the results. And when you were talking about, there is nothing you can do to get enlightened. And, it's sort of curious when you approach it that way, when you put it out that way, it seems almost hopeless because we're the way we tend to look at things, and this is about comments.
Yeah.
And of course, the other element is heart and compassion. And that's the other avenue that avoids being caught in action. The swoon of the heart. But the point I'm trying to get to is I've had a sense that life is interactive. That it's like life is there sometimes to help me along by providing opportunities or coincidences or whatnot that can be very helpful.
Steve, I'm going to stop you here because I noticed we're out of time. Somehow it slipped by us.
I can make it real quick just by throwing in the one element I wanted to. And that was recognizing that karma, another way of interpreting this interactive thing with life is by looking at it as karma. And that maybe it's not so much intelligence as it is the action of karma. You do one thing and you get something back.
There you go.
Mhm.
I'm gonna give this over to Jen to make announcements in a second. But we'll dedicate the merit first. But I wanted to thank you for your observation that thinking that you can't get enlightened, it could be hopeless. And I just want to touch on that very briefly. At a later time, then we can talk more about that. But I suspect that this is why the Buddha did not begin his teaching. And in fact, for the largest part of his life, he didn't talk about the direct route because it can feel it can be misunderstood, and it can make a person feel hopeless. And so that's a very legitimate concern. And it's why I've been kind of tentative in sharing some of this truth. Because, and I'm worried about it. So I'm really glad you brought it up. And I really hope we can talk more about this as a community going forward to clarify that dilemma. Okay, so by virtue of the merit that we've generated here tonight, may we clarify our channel and attain Buddhahood to be of greater help to others, and send out this heartfelt wish. May all beings be happy, have the causes of happiness. May all beings be free of suffering and its causes. May they never be parted from happiness, free from sorrow. May all beings be free of attachment, aversion, and indifference, and remain in great equanimity, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and real compassion. May all beings everywhere be free